Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Goodman. I am one of the co-producers of the program that is being presented this afternoon, uh, entitled "An Afternoon of the Spoken Word" with a focus on Irish poets. Um, we still have some folks coming in, about a little over 30 registered, and we're about halfway there. It's not unusual for people to come late to Zoom meetings. So we're going to, for the sake of those who haven't seen the full thing, we're going to probably do the performance readers' bios again, so you get to know a little bit about us and others who are here. It's great to see all of you who are already here on time. Deeply appreciated. So many familiar names from the community, and also just friends I've known for a long time as well. I'm going to share the screen again. We're going to do the slideshow one more time, and then we'll get underway with the program.
I wish I was in Carrickfergus only for nights in Ballygrand. I would swim over the deepest ocean, for my love to find. But the sea is wide, and I can't swim over, neither have I wings to fly. If I could find me a handsome boatman to ferry me over to my love and I. My childhood days bring back sad reflections of happy times spent so long ago. My boyhood friends and my own relation have all passed on now, like the melting snow. But I'll spend my days in endless roaming, soft is the grass, my bed is free. Oh, to be back now in Carrickfergus, on that long road down to the salty sea. And in Kilkenny, there it is reported, there are marble stones there, as black as any ink, with gold and silver. I would support her, but I'll sing no more now till I get a drink. For I am drunk today, and I'm seldom sober. A handsome rover from town to town. Oh, but I'm sick now, and my days are numbered. So come ye young men and lay me down.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again, especially those who just joined us in the last couple of minutes. I want to thank you. We are honored that you're a guest this afternoon as part of this special program that is done by permission with the Long Branch Public Library. We'd like to thank the Executive Director, Tanya Garcia, for allowing us to move forward on this. It's a program that I've been working with Tara Sullivan, who is the El Baron branch manager and also one of our performance readers today, for the better part of a year. And obviously, you know, with the pandemic, so many live performances have been canceled or postponed until it's a safer time to get together. And it's just really fortunate that we do have the technology to be able to do this virtually online, and we think, given our experience so far, we think you're going to enjoy this afternoon's program. I think you can all hear me well. If you can't, you can chat privately or send a message or just raise a figurative finger if there's an issue or something. We're going to get underway here in a moment. I do want to set some expectations about what we're doing today. We do have the program split up into two different acts. Roughly 8 or 9 pieces per act. There will be a brief intermission where you'll have an opportunity to just to get up, take a bio break, refresh that cup of Irish tea if you got it, and you know, we'll have an appropriate break time for everybody. We're also doing this in as a community partnership with New Jersey Repertory Theater, which is based here in Long Branch. If some of you aren't aware of New Jersey Repertory Theater, we'd like to take this opportunity now to allow you to learn more about it. It is truly a cultural gemstone in Long Branch, and it's been such a contributor to our community over the last, I guess, maybe 26 years. I think maybe Gabe can probably correct me on that. But I've invited the executive director of New Jersey Rep, my friend Gabe Barabbas. He and his wife have done some extraordinary work, and I've asked him to, you know, kind of start our program off talking about their contributions, and I've also asked him to speak before our intermission a little bit about some of the plans for the future. So, Gabe, if you're willing to share some of your story, we'd love to hear it.
Oh, sure. Well, hello, everyone, and again, thank you for this opportunity to share in this event and tell the story of our theater. It started about 22 years ago. At the time, I was a neurologist at Monmouth Medical Center, and I spent my days and nights driving through Lower Broadway and Long Branch, often at 2, 3 in the morning, going to emergencies and so on. As I would drift through this neighborhood, which was quite desolate. The buildings were boarded up. Nothing was open at nighttime. I kept wondering what would happen if the theater rose here. What impact would it have? Could it survive, and so on? And by serendipity, at around that time, a young couple, Margaret and David Lumia, had gotten into their head that they were going to donate their old industrial building to a not-for-profit organization that they felt would do the most to revitalize the community. And so they were conducting interviews, and I found out about that. They were interviewing Habitat for Humanity, various churches, wonderful grassroots organizations. And I got an interview with them. And I started to tell them about this idea that if there was a theater here, it could attract people from outside the community, be a catalyst. And my wife Suzanne and I already had experience from our early 20s in founding theaters in Cincinnati and Philadelphia. And these were community theaters. We were very passionate. And at the end of our 2-hour interview, David Lumia stood up and said, you know, I'm going to give this building to your organization. Just promise me one thing. Promise me that you'll succeed. And I remember shaking his hand with trepidation and taking his hand and shaking it and saying, I promise, knowing that because theaters have the mortality rate for theaters is quite high. But I made the promise to him. And over 22 years, we've built a professional theater around our mission. Our mission is very focused. We develop and produce new plays so that we can contribute to the repertoire of the American stage. And we want to be a catalyst in the revitalization of our community. And that was the focus. Now, for those of you who are pragmatic, you must understand this is a very non-pragmatic business plan. You don't start a theater doing exclusively new plays. It's deadly. Even if you're doing very popular plays, it can be deadly, but certainly this. But we decided that we would sink or swim with this mission. And for various reasons, 2 decades later, we've now produced over 150 new plays. Many of them are produced by other theaters around the country and even overseas. And so gradually we've been having the impact that we kind of dreamt about. It has not been a smooth path. Many times we found our back against the wall, but this was the goal. And so we have playwrights and actors and directors, designers coming from all over the country to assist us in giving birth to new works. So it's been remarkably gratifying in that way. We've also seen that there's been some hustle and bustle around us in the community because of our presence. And so to be able to promote an artistic vision and be of some social utility is very important. You know, many times when I stand in the dark, because I see many of our performances, I'm mesmerized when I see the audience there in the dark, just riveted on stage. And many thoughts go through my head. One is, how did these people find out about this, and who are they, and what's going on? We've also developed a sense that the arts are vital, very important, repository of what is what I would deem to be the best in man. And I sometimes tell the audience that we're an arena for open inquiry into the human condition. And so, you know, I keep saying this, it's become rote. And of course, with COVID and this great catastrophe that has beset us, I realized that my words were not just rote, but they actually are what we intend and the meaning of it. And also that the arts are protect the sanctity of the word, especially where we see how easily words can be used to manipulate and to deceive. And so it's kind of a bastion. I don't want to overstate these things, but it is truly, I think, what it is. I've always marveled that at weddings and funerals, no one recites from a computer manual, you know, a passage from a computer manual. They always come and give lines from a poem or something that has real meaning and essence. And so it's like a remarkable privilege to be able to play a role in being involved in the theater. It has a life of its own. We just ignited it, and we're trying to build a cultural institution that will serve generations to come. So that's really the overview on our theater. Um, we also champion other art forms, and I can talk about that later with what our vision and our goals are right now. We went into lockdown. We've not had anything physical. I think a lot of theaters will have trouble surviving this. But we're in a position where I'm quite confident that we will be starting up again with renewed vigor. Renewed vigor.
Gabe, thanks for providing these remarks, especially about the original story and where you've taken this so far. So many of us are supportive of this, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have you here today to share some of that.
Thank you.
And I know you've got other commitments today, but I would appreciate it if you have time at our intermission break to provide a few more remarks, maybe about some of the future plans, and let people know what your plan is.
Well, I look forward to the Irish poetry. How often do you get a chance with that, right?
Not many, and I'm really glad you're going to do
this
it.
Is wonderful.
We have a really, let me move on. Well, we have a great program today. You're going to really see a number of things or hear a number of things from some really good old hands at performance reading and those who have come and, doing this for the first time. And it's, what I love about it is that it involves so much of the community as well as a number of people that I've been producing spoken word events for about 5 years now, and it's nice to have some of those folks with us as well. Anyway, a few more people have joined us. Welcome. Again, this is the afternoon of the spoken word program, Irish Poets. We're glad that you're here with us today. I'm going to set a little bit of expectation again. We're doing this in 2 acts, about 8 poems in the first, 9 in the second. All by really good performance readers who've been preparing for the program today. We are going to have an intermission break, probably about 5 to 7 minutes. It's an opportunity to take a bio break, step away, freshen up that tea that you have, anything you need. At the end of the program, I'm going to ask if you would be willing to stick around for a couple of reasons. One, we're going to have probably about anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes of questions or comments. If you'd like to share, we'll open up the ability to unmute yourselves and ask those questions. And then we have a poll, several poll questions. Really, it should take no time whatsoever. It's all anonymous, so it's not an issue that if you say that we really were terrible, no one will know. Anyway, all kidding aside, we're going to get underway right now, and we're going to start off with my good friend Marshall O'Harth. Everyone's Irish today, and he'll start after I provide a little bit of a background here on the program. The body of Irish poetry is generally found created in 2 languages, not unsurprisingly, Irish Gaelic and English. There's always been a very complex interplay between the 2 traditions that's produced a body of work that is both very rich in variety and sometimes difficult to categorize. Actually, I mean, comparing it to what little I know of world literature, I'd almost say it's singular and stands on its own. The earliest surviving poems in Irish date back roughly to about the 6th century as part of an oral tradition. I don't think that's any big surprise. That was something that happened globally as agrarian societies became a little bit more sophisticated. Anyway, these short poems were, for practical reasons of memorization, they used the typical schemes to create rhyming and mnemonics and structure and patterns to basically improve memorization before being able to describe them or put them down to paper became popular. Now, while the first known poems in English from Ireland date to about the 14th century or so, it was Jonathan Swift who contributed so richly to really what I'd call a cultural lodestone of work that was written in English. And although there's been some cross-fertilization between the 2 language traditions, it's just not very well known that much of what we would ascribe to English language poetic traditions actually originated in Ireland, and both were enriched, for the experience. Anyway, moving a little bit forward, you you see in the 19th century a real explosion starting to happen. It's around the Romantic period. And you see poets such as William Allingham and Thomas More, who were significant contributors to this pre-revival period. And by the 19th century, this had culminated in the work of what's popularly known today as the Irish Literary Revival. And that spanned well into the 20th century. And suitable examples of that period are not only Oscar Wilde, but his mother, who was a woman of letters, if you will. Lady Jane Wilde. We're actually going to have a presentation of that work today as well. Now, the late revival period in Ireland also produced poets who became central to the transition between that Romantic literature period and, what we would refer to as the modern realist literary movements. Those would include William Butler Yeats and the novelist James Joyce. One of the things that it can't be stated enough. If anything, it's often just not talked about. But the struggle for independence and a distinct national identity was also a catalyst for a lot of creative literary energy. And some of those folks, they sought an ideal reminiscent vision of Ireland, such as C.S. Lewis. People sometimes are surprised to learn that C.S. Lewis was born in Belfast, Northern Irish. And it's also, he was also accompanied by other contemporaries in that period during the struggle for independence, such as the pacifist George William Russell, and then there were others who, probably steeped in the cynicism and of that modernist expression. You would find something that's a little bit more prosaic or introspective, like the work of playwright Samuel Beckett. So again, Irish nationalism had a profound effect and was transitional, especially from the Irish literary revival into the modern traditions. We would include folks like that, such as Joseph Campbell, who was one of the leaders in the Irish Civil War. Anyway, towards the last quarter of the 20th century, modern Irish poets tend to have a very wide range of diversity. A lot of poets influenced by modernist tradition and those facing the new questions, posed by an increasingly urban and cosmopolitan society. And of those modern poets, we've included the works of Seamus Heaney, Evan Boland, and Patrick Kavanagh as part of our performance today. So, sorry if it's a little long, but I wanted to kind of give you a bit of a background on the experience that you should expect today. And again, leading this off is my friend Marshall. Marshall, go ahead and take it away.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's really been a pleasure for me. It's the first time I'm doing this. So I'm going to be reading two poems. The first is going to be by William Allingham, who was born on the 19th of March in 1824 in Ballyshannon, County Donegal, Ireland. And he died on the 18th of November, 1889, at the age of 65 in Hampstead, London. But according to his final wishes, he was buried in Ballyshannon. He was a poet and a scholar. He was most well known for his poem, The Fairies, that I'm going to read, and a posthumously published diary in which he was able to share the fact that he was a member of the literati in the middle of the 19th century and close relationships with Tennyson and Carlyle and Dante Alighieri Rossetti, such that they were sort of part of the pre-Raphaelites. And as a result of that, the poem that I'm going to read, The Fairies, is a poem that presents fairies very different from the Disney Tinkerbell cutesy stuff. And these fairies are much more serious. As a matter of fact, the first lines of the poem have been represented in a variety of science fiction works, and in the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. At the beginning, the tinker quotes, "We daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men." And I was also attracted to this poem because one of the things that the fairies do is that they could kidnap someone, changelings, and the character in the poem that they kidnap is named Bridget, and that's the name of my youngest granddaughter. And if you will all bear with me, I'm going to try and do this with a bit of an Irish brogue. I grew up in Inwood in Manhattan that has a large Irish population. The fairies, up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go hunting for fear of little men. Wee folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. Down along the rocky shore, some make their home. They live on crispy pancakes of yellow tide foam. Some in the reeds of the Black Mountain Lake, with frogs for their watchdogs, all night awake. High on the hilltop, the old king sits. He is now so old and gray, he's nigh lost his wits. With a bridge of white mist, Columkill he crosses on his stately journeys from Slieve-a-League to Rosses, or going up with music on cold starry nights to sup with the queen of the gay northern lights. They stole little Bridget for 7 years long. When she came down again, her friends were all gone. They took her lightly back between the night and morrow. They thought that she was fast asleep, but she was dead with sorrow. They have kept her ever since, deep within the lake, on a bed of flag leaves, watching till she wake. By the craggy hillside, through the mosses bare, they have planted thorn trees for pleasure here and there. Is any man so daring as dig up them in spite? He shall find their sharpest thorns in his bed at night. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. We folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. The second poem is from the very Reverend Jonathan Swift, which Robert tells us was the first to do Irish poetry in English. I first learned of him as an undergraduate in the 1960s at CCNY in my English literature class that was taught by an Englishman. So everything that he said sounded really significant and impressive. The very Reverend Jonathan Swift was born on the 30th of November, 1667 in Dublin, Ireland. He died at the age of 77 on the 19th of October in 1745. He's buried in St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, in which he was also a priest. He's pretty famous. He wrote under several pen names: Isaac Bickerstaff, M.B. Drapier, Lemuel Gulliver, Simon Wagstaff. Lemuel Gulliver, of course, was one of his most famous pieces, Gulliver's Travels, which we had to read in my English literature class. The whole thing was wonderful. And one of my favorite things that he's ever written was A Modest Proposal, which was an attempt to solve the food crisis in Ireland in those days by suggesting that the poor would donate their own children to the rich as for food. And here's an example of what he said in that piece, A Modest Proposal. A young healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing, and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled, and I make no doubt that it will equally serve in a fricassee or a ragout. I'm going to read the poem On the Moon, and I think to just help us kind of get an understanding of it, I think it's an example of Jonathan Swift's sort of sarcasm and critique of humanity as he did in Gulliver's Travels, trying to give us the idea of what are people and how great we are, but we could be Laputians living up in the sky, or we could bring Nabigans where we don't make any sense. And apparently we project onto the moon our ideas of what humans are, and we put that onto the moon. But Jonathan Swift challenges that in On the Moon. On the moon, I with borrowed silver shine. What you see is none of mine. First, I show you but a quarter, like the bow that guards the Tartar. Then the heart, and then the whole, ever dancing round the pole. What will raise your admiration? I am not of God's creation, but sprung, and this I truth maintain, like Pallas from my father's brain. And after all, I chiefly owe my beauty to the shades below. Most wondrous forms you see me wear, a man, a woman, lion, bear, a fish, a fowl, a cloud, a field, all figures heaven and earth can yield, like Daphne sometimes in a tree, yet am not one of all you see.
That was great, Marshall. Well done. Looks like you really had a lot of fun with it as well.
Yes, I did. Thank you so much.
No need to thank me. It was great. So thank you again.
Pleasure.
Moving along in the program, we'll have my friend Lisa Kelly, who will be performance reading a version of Carol Moore by George William Russell. Good afternoon, Lisa.
Good afternoon, Robert. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm very honored to be here and to be participating in the program. My first poem is by George William Russell. He also was known as A.E., his pen name. Born in 1867, died 1935. So his life and his career spanned 2 centuries. He was a lifelong friend of Yeats and also knew James Joyce and even into the 30s, Frank O'Connor. So he really had a very influential reach for Irish poetry and literature. Let's see. So he was a ginger with a bushy red beard who claimed to be a clairvoyant. Besides being a poet and writer, he was an artist, a mystic and spiritualist. He had an abiding and deep interest in Irish folklore. His artwork, if you get a chance, is quite lovely. I wish I could share some of it. He did many paintings of fairies. If you're familiar with the fairy paintings that were popular during the time of Arthur Conan Doyle and that era in the 1920s, they're similar to that. And they also have, I thought, a pre-Raphaelite feel to them. He painted a lot of beach scenes, ocean scenes, beautiful, soft colors. He was an educated man, a husband and a father with some varied careers in addition to his writing. He was a nationalist sympathizer. He was also a pacifist, and he felt that he preferred not to express political opinions freely, but he did use his writing and editing as his way of participating and his involvement in the politics. And he was an Easter Rising sympathizer. He did visit the United States in the 1930s, and he was very well received all over the country, and his books sold in large numbers. I mentioned he used the pseudonym of the 2 initials A.E., which was derived from the word aeon, signifying the lifelong quest of man. He is mentioned in James Joyce's Ulysses, where Daedalus borrows money from him and then remarks A-E-I-O-U, which kind of tickled me. Russell was known for his generosity and hospitality. He is described as a most loyal friend, a kind and forgiving man, noted for his exceptional kindness and generosity toward younger writers. Frank O'Connor termed him the man who was the father to 3 generations of Irish writers. And P.L. Travers, who you may know as the creator of Mary Poppins. And if you've seen the movie Saving Mr. Banks, you know she was not known for her sunny personality. She was another writer who gratefully recalled his help with her career. He died in England in 1935, and his body was brought back to Ireland, and he was interred in Mount Jerome Cemetery in Dublin. So Robert picked the poem for me. I was not familiar with him, or if I studied him in college, I didn't recall him, but I did, I did like the poem, and I like Russell. He sounds like a lovely man. And I enjoy that he was an adult, a grown man who is not ashamed to paint and write about fairies. So this is his poem, Carramore, which was written in 1913. It's a lonely road through bogland to the lake at Carramore, and a sleeper there lies dreaming where the water laps the shore. Though the moth wings of the twilight in their purples are unfurled, yet his sleep is filled with music by the masters of the world. There's a hand as white as silver that is fondling with his hair. There are glimmering feet of sunshine that are dancing by him there, and half-open lips of fairy that were dyed a fairy red in their revels where the hazel tree its holy clusters shed. Come away, the red lips whisper. All the world is weary now. 'Tis the twilight of the ages, and it's time to quit the plow. Oh, the very sunlight's weary ere it lightens up the dew, and its gold is changed and faded before it falls to you. Though your Colleen's heart be tender, a tenderer heart is near. What's the starlight in her glances when the stars are shining clear? Who would kiss the fading shadow when the flower face glows above? 'Tis the beauty of all beauty that is calling for your love. Oh, the great gates of the mountain have opened once again, and the sound of song and dancing falls upon the ears of men, and the land of youth lies gleaming, flushed with rainbow light and mirth, and the old enchantment lingers in the honey heart of earth.
Great job, Lisa. Thank you. Sounds like
Thank you.
sounds like you really. I get the impression you know he was yet undiscovered to you in your research, and you really learned a lot about him. I think you conveyed well a lot about the man and well represented his work. Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Well, moving on with the program, we're off to a great start here. Of course, the next is a piece called "The Famine Year." It's a very poignant and challenging piece, and I am deeply grateful that an old friend, Sandra Bain, is here to do the performance reading. It's a challenging piece, and I just knew that she would do well with this. And again, glad that she's here. I'm handing off to you, Sandy.
Hey, thank you, Robert. Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to be reading The Famine Year by Lady Jane Wilde, and as Robert alluded in his introductory remarks, she is the mother of Oscar Wilde. This poem was written, of course, about the potato famine in Ireland. Between 1844 and 1851, it's estimated that about 1.8 million Irish died. And during that time, a high percentage of Irish crops that were needed at home were exported to England. This moving and powerful poem paints a picture of slow starvation and mass suffering over time. The tone of the piece is intentionally sad, and the author pointedly accuses England that the humanity and the empathy that could have been theirs to give and was not, could now only come from God. So, The Famine Year by Lady Jane Wilde. Weary men, what reap ye? Golden corn for the stranger? What sow ye? Human corpses that wait for the avenger? Fainting forms, hunger stricken, what see you in the offing? Stately ships to bear our food away amid the strangers scoffing. There's a proud array of soldiers, what do they round your door? They guard our master's granaries from the thin hands of the poor. Pale mothers, wherefore weeping, would to God that we were dead. Our children swoon before us, and we cannot give them bread. Little children, tears are strange upon your infant faces. God meant you but to smile within your mother's soft embraces. Oh, we know not what is smiling, and we know not what is dying. We are hungry, very hungry, and we cannot stop our crying. And some of us grew cold and white. We know not what it means, but as they lie beside us, we tremble in our dreams. There's a gaunt crowd on the highway. Are ye come to pray to man? With hollow eyes that cannot weep, and for words your faces wan. No, the blood is dead within our veins. We care not now for life. Let us die hid in the ditches, far from children and from wife. We cannot stay and listen to their raving, famished cries. Bread, 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 and none to still their agonize. We left our infants playing with their dead mother's hand. We left our maidens maddened by the fever's scorching brand. Better maiden, thou wert strangled in thine own dark twisted tresses. Better infant, thou wert smothered in thy mother's first caresses. We are fainting in our misery, but God will hear our groan. Yet if fellow man desert us, will he hearken from his throne? Accursed are we in our own land, let toil we still and toil. But the stranger reaps our harvest, the alien owns our soil. O Christ, how have we sinned that on our native plains we perish houseless, naked, starved, with branded brow like Cain's. Dying, dying wearily, with a torture sure and slow. Dying as a dog would die by the wayside as we go. One by one they're falling round us, their pale faces to the sky. We've no strength left to dig them graves. There, let them lie. The wild bird, if he's stricken, is mourned by the others, but we die in a Christian land, we die amid our brothers. In the land which God has given, like a wild beast in his cave, without a tear, a prayer, a shroud, a coffin, or a grave. Ha, but think ye the contortions on each livid face ye see will not be read on judgment day by eyes of deity. We are wretches, famished, scorn, human tools to build your pride, but God will take vengeance for the souls for whom Christ died. Now is your hour of pleasure, bask ye in the world's caresses, from the cabins and the ditches in their charred, uncoffined masses. For the angel of the trumpet will know them as he passes. A ghastly spectral army before the great God will stand and arraign ye as our murderers, the spoilers of our land.
Wow, well done. It's an interesting observation, and maybe you can comment on it. But it is certainly an example during the late Romantic period of something that is really passing as not only social commentary, but really a bit of protest, and doing so defiantly in opposition to what the government policy was at the time. Would you agree, or?
Oh, I totally agree. And I think we can think of other countries in current history who have an opportunity to reach across a border and help another country in need and are not doing it. So this may be a poem that's very old, but it still has a very current message.
Yeah, no, I think it's very poignant, and you did so well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
The next piece is by Seamus Haney. We'll hear a little bit more from him a little bit later. The performance reader for this piece is Janet Burkhead. And Janet, you can unmute, and if you want to start your video, you can do so.
There we go. The first poem I'm reading today is Act of Union by Seamus Haney. I was not terribly familiar with him. I read one or two of his other poems before. So I did some research into the poem, and I found an analysis on wordpress.com written by an Oliver Gray. Irish literature has had a tendency towards representing Ireland as raped woman. Seamus Haney's Act of Union from his 1975 book of poetry, North, challenges this dominant nationalist idea through his manipulation of the sonnet form to complicate Northern Irish nationalist views of their history. The sonnet form is conventionally associated with love poetry, yet Haney has adopted it to construct a sexual union that is violent with possible rape connotations. Haney's use of persona is particularly interesting in that it is a personification of both England and Ireland, and it is through this persona that Haney complicates the nationalist view of colonization as a rape. Although he wrote Act of Union from the point of view of Britain, he illustrates the nation as a dominating sexual being which forces Ireland into something she never wanted. He deliberately portrayed Ireland as a feminine character to show her vulnerability and lack of defense. The structural division of the poem as two sonnets presents a cause and effect, action and aftermath, connects Northern Ireland's perception of itself with the Troubles, which was at its peak at the time of the poem's publication. The Troubles was a period of ethno-political conflict in Northern Ireland, which spilled over at various times into England, the Republic of Ireland, and mainland Europe. The duration of the Troubles is conventionally dated from the late 1960s and considered by many to have ended with the Belfast Good Friday Agreement of 1998. The period from 1970 through 1972 saw an explosion of political violence in Northern Ireland, peaking in 1972 when nearly 500 people, just over half of them civilians, lost their lives, the most devastating period in terms of loss of life in the whole conflict. This epoch occurred just before the publication of Act of Union and would have been influential in Haney's writing of the poem. Act of Union by Seamus Haney. Tonight, a first movement, a pulse, as if the rain in bogland gathered head to slip and flood, a bog burst, a gash breaking open the ferny bed. Your back is a firm line of eastern coast, and arms and legs are thrown beyond your gradual hills. I caress the heaving province where our past has grown. I am the tall kingdom over your shoulder, that you would neither cajole nor ignore. Conquest is a lie. I grow older, conceding your half-independent shore, within whose borders now my legacy culminates inexorably. And I am still imperially male, leaving you with pain, the rending process in the colony, the battering ram, the boom burst from within. The act sprouted an obstinate fifth column, whose stance is growing unilateral, whose heart beneath your heart is a war drum, mustering force. His parasitical and ignorant little fists already beat at your borders, and I know they're cocked at me across the water. No treaty I foresee will salve completely your tracked and stretch-marked body, the big pain that leaves you raw, like open ground again.
Wow, quite powerful. And Janet, well researched. Thank you. You know, Haney, as a modern poet, his work on its initial reads often seems prosaic, but obviously clearly rich in metaphor and setting the scene. Can you comment or?
Just a very powerful piece. I'm glad I got the opportunity to read it for this program.
Thanks again. You did a great job.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next speaker, which would be just got to find him here. Unfortunately, it gets a little lost in the shuffle. Let's see what we got here. Give me a moment. I'm going to find Gene and put him on the spotlight.
I'm unmuted. I'm good.
There you are. Perfect.
Yeah, good. We're ready to rock. Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I get a chance to talk about somebody that I've admired for the past 100 years. Is James Joyce, who, as you know, is probably one of the best writers in the English language. He was an expert in short stories. He's an expert in the lengthy novel. He's even expert in called a circular novel. In one of his books called Finnegan's Wake, which starts off and ends up in the same place, and it's about 400 pages long, and it is terribly hard to read. Also, it is some of his other works. The one he won the Nobel Prize for, Ulysses, which is an experimental book done with different types of stream of consciousness and different kinds of writing, and also his short stories and novels, including The Dubliners and The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. I am honored to read one of his poems. He's not known so much for his poetry as he is for the other stuff, but the poems that he writes are dynamic and pivotal, and possibly have 2 or 3 different things going on at one time. So the one that I'll be doing this afternoon is called I Hear an Army Charging Upon the Land. I hear an army charging upon the land, and the thunder of horses plunging, foam about their knees. Arrogant, in black armor, behind them stand, disdaining the reins, with fluttering whips, the charioteers. They cry unto the night their battle name. I moan in sleep when I hear afar their whirling laughter. They cleave the gloom of dreams, a blinding flame, clanging upon the heart as upon an anvil. They come shaking in triumph, their long green hair. They come out of the sea and run, shouting by the shore. My heart, have you no wisdom, thus to despair? My love, my love, my love, why have you left me alone?
Wow. You know, you're right. James Joyce, not necessarily known for poetry, but actually has a fairly sizable body of it, if I understand correct.
Yes, he does. But you can see clips a little bit, but when you look at Ulysses and you look at the Dubliners, and it takes charge. But I think it could stand alone. If it was somebody, a lesser human being, it would be their masterpiece. But this is kind of like his side job. This is poems.
Fabrication. The poem's very interesting. It certainly it sets a very highly descriptive scene and experience, but it takes a bit of a pivot.
Yeah, it does. A couple of times. You're talking about horses and charioteers, and you're talking about loneliness and being in love and unrequited love. Why have you left me alone? And loneliness. He is with a crowd in a wartime situation, to being left alone and hearing things while he's asleep. It's dynamic. It's great to listen to.
Well done, Gene. And again, glad you're able to join us for today's presentation. I know you'll be reading a little bit later on, a little piece from Sam Beckett, I understand.
Oh, yeah, another hero.
Should be,
absolutely.
Be good.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you. Next up is my cohort in crime. That would be Ms. Tara Sullivan. And let me see if I can get this set up properly. Tara, if you'd be willing to show yourself to us, thank you.
It's, first of all, I plead innocent to being part of anything, any cohort in crime. And thank you, Robert, for pulling this together, for challenging us to find out more about these amazing poets, and for just getting us all here. It's no small feat, particularly for many people who aren't used to coordinating this way. I mean, if you're a theater person, you do it in person. In any case, I chose When You Are Old by William Butler Yeats. And instead of really talking too much about him, I think we've been teaching poetry all wrong. I think if we told 3rd through 5th graders that there's a group of poets, group of magicians, of spiritual believers, of occultists who happen to write poetry, they would all read it. If you told them that there was somebody who chased his one true love his whole entire life and never shook his love for her, and he also wrote poetry, they would read that. So that is my take from what I've learned about Yeats. Never mind that he found the Abbey Theatre and is still one of the highest regarded poets of Ireland. He was even more interesting than that, in my humble opinion. So I chose When You Are Old. When you are old and gray and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes had once and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace and loved your beauty with love false or true. But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur, a little sadly, how love fled and paced upon the mountains overhead and hid his face among a crowd of stars.
That is such an incredibly lovely piece, and you've certainly done it justice. No secret that you and I are both big fans of W.B. Yeats, and we'll be giving a little bit more during the intermission of one of his poems, "Song of Wandering Angus," and I believe you're going to start the second act with another piece. Which one is it?
The one is Into the Twilight.
Into the Twilight. Yep.
Into the Twilight.
Another great one, and I think probably people more familiar with that one. So I'm looking forward to it, as I'm sure others are here as well. We are now officially at our halfway point, so to speak. We are going to take a break here in just a moment, and we just remove the spotlight off of Tara. You can hide if you wish. Anyway, I've also asked, nothing wrong with your screen. That red dot on my nose is an injury from a falling piece of wood. Anyway, nonetheless, I've also asked Gabe Barabbas from New Jersey Repertory Theater to provide a few remarks before we take our roughly 5 to 10 minute break as an intermission. Again, it's an opportunity for not only the performance readers, but also you as the audience. If you just want to just step away or take care of something, freshen up a beverage, whatever works. Gabe, could you tell us a little bit more about the plans of New Jersey Rep going forward?
Yes. As a continuation of our story, our theater, as I described it, is on Lower Broadway and Long Branch. And about 5 years ago, through the generosity of an anonymous donor, we were able to purchase the West End School, which is a 30,000 square foot school. And so the possibilities now are endless. We just have to raise the funds to fully renovate that property, which is no small challenge. But what it's done is it's opened the door to us not only building another performing venue there, but also we very much believe in promoting and championing poetry and art and music. And we've been starting a capital campaign, but because of COVID, of course, we had to shut down. So we said, what do we do now? And we decided that with the year given to us, we would build our cultural center virtually. And our first project was we spent 5 months building a virtual museum. We purchased architectural software, and it is actually a museum you walk into. The doors open, there it is. And we started with an exhibit of a self-taught artist, Quentin Green, and we actually featured his work, about 50 paintings, and actually sold to collectors around the country about a third of the paintings from the museum. And we're going to exhibit other things. We're working on a theater, but the one that's closest to my heart is we are now just about done constructing a virtual poetry center or poetry platform. We named it the Mermaid Tavern, and there's a reason. You know, COVID gives you these hallucinatory fevers and so on. You have a lot of time on your hand. And I was familiar with Keats's poem, Lines on a Mermaid Tavern. He actually wrote it when he was young, and it's tough to say that because Keats wrote his masterpieces and died at the age of 25. So what does a young Keats mean? It means he probably wrote this in around his early 20s, maybe 19. And I'll just recite one little stanza that inspired me. Souls of poets dead and gone, what Elysium have ye known? Happy field or mossy cavern, choicer than the Mermaid Tavern. And what he was doing is he was hearkening back to the Mermaid Tavern that in Elizabethan London was the go-to place for the writers, the luminaries of the time. And it burnt down in the Great Fire of 1666. And the conceit is that it was never rebuilt until now, where we have built the Mermaid Tavern. And we're launching it probably next month. And we're going to use this construct just to conjure this in your mind. And at some point, I hope to show it to you. On your computer, you actually walk through the streets of Elizabethan London on the cobbled walks. There's these signs of the various proprietors. You turn a corner, and lo and behold, there's the Mermaid Tavern. The doors open. You walk in, and it's an elaborate tavern. You meander your way through the tables and seats, and you come to what looks like an elevated little stage. There's curtains with embroidered mermaids on it that opens, and on that platform, we will present poets reading, video interpretations of poetry, and so on. And we're building a virtual cultural center that'll have 3 edifices, a theater, a museum, and the Mermaid Tavern. And so that's what we've been working on for the last 6 months. We had quite a learning curve because now we had to confront the technologic aspects of creating something that's compelling and is also welcoming in this way.
Gabe, thanks for sharing us about those plans. You know, the museum itself, it was actually quite successful with the feature of one of the artists, correct?
It's on our website. We realized that we can keep building floors to the museum endlessly. We don't have to get certificates of occupancy and jump through hoops and worry about insurance. And so we're going to be promoting and presenting the work of various artists, and we can leave another show on while another one is opening. I think it provides great opportunities. And even when we come back physically, we've learned so much about the impact of this technology that we're going to continue with these virtual activities, even when we physically open. The various things we've shown on our website, which also include plays and so on, in the past 12 months where we desperately wanted to remain engaged. We've had over 35,000 people actually viewing these various things, and that includes the museum.
Gabe, I want to thank you again for joining us. But before you leave, just two quick items. Share with us the painting that's right behind you.
Oh yes, yes. One of our subscribers, loyal subscribers, who actually started with us when we opened, Mormon Satter, was a member of the community, and he died at the age of 90 about 7 years ago. And Warren was a remarkable artist who, given his age, actually went through stages, artistic periods that paralleled the artistic periods that he lived through. So it's remarkable. This is from his more kind of realistic period. This is a view in New York City of an outdoor market. And he was very careful about the architectural elements of the things that he painted. And these are actual buildings, many of them that are still standing in Manhattan.
So some sees the influence.
Yeah, it's Warren Satter. There he is, his painting, and remarkable artist. And when Warren died, he actually donated about 100 of his artworks to our theater to use to raise funds. And at various times, we've had auctions of his work.
Well, it's extraordinary, and what you've done with New Jersey Rep, even during this challenging time, is quite amazing. You're a nonprofit, if I understand, a legal 501c3
Yes.
Nonprofit. So if someone were to make a donation, it's tax deductible for
It is.
anybody who makes that donation. I'll tell you what, I've done this at least once in the past year, especially during this challenging time. But if you're not familiar with the work of New Jersey Rep, we will send you a link to their website after today's production. And there is an ability to donate to them and to their work, right from the website itself. But we're really all looking forward to that day when we can walk back into the theater and be there with you, although you get the best seat in the house from the back because you get to see our reactions. But we're really looking forward to that day when we can all come back and see an original production in New Jersey Rep's theater, either the Lumia on Broadway or the emerging black box, as well as a stage that's going to be at the Old West End School. Gabe, thank you again. I really deeply appreciate you taking the time. I know you had a couple of commitments today, and just deeply grateful that you were able to join us as part of this.
This is a wonderful treat for me. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. All right. Again, that will now signal that we're going to take a little break here. How we're going to do this is that everyone can kind of get up, stretch their legs, refresh a beverage, bio break if you need it. We'll be back in about, let's say about 6-7 minutes or so. I'm going to play a video of a Yeats performance of a Yeats poem called "The Song of Wandering Angus." It is truly a remarkable piece and performed by the actor Michael Gambon. And then I'll just play the bio slideshow again for those who came a little bit later after we had played it several times before, just so people can learn a little bit about our performance readers. Very deeply grateful for their work in supporting today's program. So anyway, go ahead, get up. I'll do the rest from here. Enjoy. Okay, let's see. There we go. And here we go.
I went out to the hazel wood because a fire was in my head, and cut and peeled a hazel wand and hooked a berry to a thread. And when white moths were on the wing and moth-like stars were flickering out, I dropped the berry in a stream and caught a little silver trout. When I had laid it on the floor, I went to blow the fire aflame, but something rustled on the floor, and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossom in her hair, who called me by my name and ran and faded through the brightening air. Though I am old with wandering through hollow lands and hilly lands, I will find out where she has gone and kiss her lips and take her hands and walk among long dappled grass and pluck till time and times are done the silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun. I wish I was in Carrickfergus only for nights in Ballygrass. I would swim over the deepest ocean, for my love to find. But the sea is wide, and I can't swim over, neither have I wings to fly. If I could find me a handsome boatman to ferry me over to my love and die. My childhood days bring back sad reflections of happy times spent so long ago. My boyhood friends and my own relations have all passed on now, like the melting snow.
but I'll spend my days in endless roaming. Soft is the grass, my bed is free. Oh, to be back now in Carrickfergus, on that long road down to the salty sea. And in Kilkenny, there it is reported, there are marble stones there as black as any ink, with gold and silver. I would support her, but I'll sing no more now till I get a drink. For I am drunk today, and I'm seldom sober. A handsome rover from town to town. Oh, but I'm sick now, and my days are numbered. So come ye young men and lay me down.
Welcome back, everyone. We are moving on to our second act of the Afternoon of the Spoken Word, Irish Poets. Big thank you to the performance readers who have already performed. You've done a great job, and I just really admire the amount of research that you did into the poets and the actual pieces themselves. I think you've enriched them as well with the performance, with that commentary. Anyway, we have another 7 or 8 poems to go. Again, to set some expectations at the end of the formal program, we are going to open this up to question and answers. Probably no more than 5 or 6 minutes, but we'll certainly go as long. Any questions you may have about the poets or the pieces, and we'll do our best to give you our thoughts. After that, there is a short 4-question poll that we'd like to have you participate in, a little bit about what you thought of the program and some of the pieces, as well as some of our thoughts about future programs, and would certainly like to get your feedback. So anyway, without any further commentary, we're going to run right into the second act. And starting this off, we've got a lot of Yeats with us today. And this is probably a piece that you may have heard. It's been used in many movies as well as other written quotations. It's a piece known as Into the Twilight. Tara, can you tell us what's going on?
Hello again. I did not add anything since I spoke my piece about Mr. Yeats earlier, but it's a beautiful piece. It again brings such an element of worldliness into such a small place, and very relatable, I think, regardless of where you're from or who you are. So this is Into the Twilight. Outworn heart, in a time outworn, come clear of the nets of wrong and right. Laugh hard again in the gray twilight. Sigh heart again in the dew of the morn. Your mother, Ire, is always young, dew ever shining and twilight gray. Though hope fall from you and love decay, burning in fires of a slanderous tongue. Come, heart, where hill is heaped upon hill, for there are the mystical brotherhood of sun and moon, and hollow and wood, and river and stream work out their will. And God stands winding his lonely horn, and time and the world are ever in flight. And love is less kind than the gray twilight, and hope is less dear than the dew of the morn.
Very, very powerful, very, very powerful piece. It creates a great deal of rich imagery and touching upon really kind of things ethereal, otherworldly almost. You know, in your earlier remarks, you talked, you know, when you had read When You Are Old. And I love that line that someone had loved the pilgrim soul in you. It was someone he had in mind. And much like his other piece, the poem entitled Peace, he was speaking about a specific person. Can you talk about that?
It's thought he was speaking of his beloved Maud, who, though he didn't get to see her grow old and have that comfort with her, loved her really his whole life, looked to her as his muse. I still haven't figured out exactly why they just didn't work, but there are some great readings and letters between them that I'm planning on diving into. But with both pieces, and I'm sure with much of his work, I wouldn't know for fact, she was his driving force.
Music, yeah.
Completely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. Well read, and thank you for all the work you put into researching about Yeats. He's really a kind of a figure that really an entire program could be built around.
Oh, absolutely.
If there was such a desire. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've enriched me, and I'm sure everyone who's been attending. We'll be moving on to our next piece, which will be done by Janet Burkhead. Let me see if I can get her focused here. This done. Jenny, you can.
I'm muted, but
there we go.
start my video, okay?
Okay.
Here we go. The poem I'm going to read is by C.S. Lewis. I didn't research much about the poem itself because it seemed more clear to me than the Seamus Heaney piece. You do need to know who Balor is. He is a god in Irish mythology. I gather that he is equivalent to Zeus or Jupiter in Greco-Roman mythology, king of the gods. Grendel is a character in Beowulf, and if you Google a summary of Beowulf, you'll find out all about him. But I did write up a little bit about C.S. Lewis's life that I want to share with you before I read the poem. Clive Staples Lewis was born in Belfast, Ireland on November 29th, 1898. He had a creative imagination from his earliest days, including a strong interest in fantasy storytelling that he shared with his older brother Warren. They lost their mother to cancer when Lewis was 10. Shortly afterwards, Lewis was sent away to a boarding school in Herefordshire that his brother also attended. Later, he studied under a private tutor, W.T. Kirkpatrick. Kirkpatrick became a major influence in his life and was the model for the narrator's guide in The Great Divorce. Lewis excelled academically and was awarded a teaching fellowship at Magdalen College, Oxford University in 1925. He became a member of the Inklings, a group of intellectuals that included Warren Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. It was through his association with the Inklings that he became a devout Christian. C.S. Lewis wrote fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. He is best known for the classics of children's literature, the Chronicles of Narnia. His most popular works for adults include a radio series on Christian apologetics that was eventually published as Mere Christianity, and another book of apologetics entitled The Screwtape Letters, in which he uses satire to illuminate human sin. Lewis saw himself as a traditional Irishman, but he was not overly involved with the politics of nationalism. By modern standards, he is now considered part of the Irish literary revival. He is also firmly placed in the English literature of the 20th century. His poem, Irish Nocturne, was included in Spirits in Bondage, the only volume of his collected poems published in 1919 when he was only 20. In it, we can see the vivid imagery that later made it into his works of fiction. And thank you, Robert, for adding the commentary on where he fits into the canon of Irish poets. Irish Nocturne by C.S. Lewis. Now the gray mist comes creeping up from the waste ocean's weedy strand and fills the valley as a cup if filled of evil drink in a wizard's hand. And the trees fade out of sight like dreary ghosts unhealthily into the damp pale night. Till you almost think that a clearer eye could see some shape come up of a demon seeking apart his meat, as Grendel sought in heart the thanes that sat by the wintry log. Grendel, or the shadowy mass of Balor, or the man with the face of clay, the gray, gray walker who used to pass over the rock arch nightly to his prey. But here at the dumb, slow stream where the willows hang, with never a wind to blow the mists apart, bitter and bitter it is for thee. O my heart, looking upon this land where poets sang, thus with the dreary shroud unwholesome over it spread, and knowing the fog and the cloud in her people's heart and head, even as it lies forever upon her coasts, making them dim and dreamy, lest her sons should ever arise and remember all their boasts. For I know that the colorless skies and the blurred horizons breed lonely desire and many words and brooding and never a deed.
It's, that piece is so rich in imagery.
Oh.
Do you equate it to anything else that he's written, or do you see a pattern or something else? Or?
Well, his the reference to Grendel would be natural to him because his field was medieval literature. But he does describe the surroundings very well in the Chronicles of Narnia, and I think you see that same attention to place in Narnia as well as in this poem.
Highly descriptive, and creating again somewhat other, like it's a little bit of unworldly images, but you can
yes.
Were you surprised to find that he had a body of poetry, or?
I knew he had a body of poetry. I just had never explored it. This is the first poem of his that I have ever read, and I will be reading more.
Well, that's good.
And I thank you, Tara, for remembering that I love Lewis and offering me this poem for my part once I volunteered to join this merry troop.
Merry troop indeed, and well read and well researched. Thanks for enriching the experience for all of us. The next speaker is someone I'm very close to. It's me. I'm very glad to read a piece by Seamus Heaney. Janet was able to share Heaney's Act of Union in the first act. A little bit more about Heaney. He was a professor of literature, he had already, by the time he had actually become a professor, he already had quite a body of work in writing. One of the most notable things that he did is he wrote a modern translation of Beowulf, and it was somewhat extraordinary because it was really kind of geared more towards modern sensibilities rather than some of its mythic qualities. But he did it in a way, and it's hard to describe, and it might be worth doing somewhere else. But he created a translation of Beowulf that was very much aligned with the Irish mythic experience. And it's hard to describe that without actually reading some of it or excerpts of it, and might be an opportunity at another time. As a living poet, he did something that was quite extraordinary. There's kind of an old joke in the poetry community that there are no rich poets except for Lord Byron, who inherited a lot of wealth. Most poets go unrecognized in their lifetime, and if they are, it's a good thing. But it's not anything that's ever really made them wealthy, and it didn't necessarily do so for Heaney. But he, in his lifetime as a living poet, at one point he represented 2/3 of all sales of poetry books, which is just a remarkable testament to how relatable he was to modern Irish sensibilities around poetry. Always entertaining. What I find so incredible about him is his clever use of metaphor within the bounds of prosaic language. And the value of that is that he is able to get a lot of strong concepts across in what I refer to as accessible language, but still, bring a lot of strength to the piece. The piece I'm reading is called Digging. It's really a bit of a memory. It's probably more sentimental than anything else, but I hope you enjoy it. It's called Digging. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean, rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father, digging. I look down till his straining rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. The coarse boot nestled on the lug. The shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. By God, the old man could handle a spade, just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Toner's Bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up to drink it and then fell to right away, nicking and slicing neatly, heaving sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good of the turf. Digging. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head, but I've no spade to follow men like them. Digging by Seamus Heaney. Next up is we have a return of my friend Sandra Bain, who will be reading a piece by a modern poet known as Evan Boland. You're on.
Okay. Yeah, Inheritance by Evan Boland. Evan Boland is a more modern Irish poet, passing just a year ago in April of 2020 at the age of 75. The role of women in Irish history plays prominently in her work, and you'll see that play out in the poem I'm about to read to you. You'll also note that this poem has a really loose structure, if any at all. There's no meter, there's no rhyme. It's more like the musings of the speaker, who in this case is a woman who's resigned to her circumstances. So as you listen to the varied structure of the poem, think how it might also reflect on the varied nature of life and its circumstances, and of course, its inheritances. Inheritance by Avon Bolin. I've been wondering what I have to leave behind to give my daughters. No good offering the view between here and Three Rock Mountain, the blueness in the hours before rain, the long haze afterward. The ground I stood on was never really mine. It might not ever be theirs. And gifts that were passed through generations, silver and the fluid light left after silk, were never given here. This is an island of waters, inland distances, with a history of want and women who struggled to make the nothing, which was all they had, into something they could leave behind. I learned so little from them. The lace bobbin with its braided mesh, its oat straw pillow, and the wheat-colored shawl knitted in one season to imitate another are all crafts I never had and can never hand on. But then again, there was a night I stayed awake, alert and afraid, with my first child who turned and turned, sick, fretful. When dawn came, I held my hand over the absence of fever, over skin which had stopped burning, as if I knew the secrets of health and air, as if I understood them, and listened to the silence and thought, I must have learned that somewhere.
Wow. Yeah, when we put together programs, I often invite performance readers like yourself. Like, we might have a theme. We work together on Emily Dickinson, and I tell the readers, here's what we're thinking of doing, and pick one, pick two. And in this particular instance, you're the one who brought this poem forward. You had started researching some of the poets, and you brought this forward, and it was such a great selection. It's powerful. Can you comment a little bit about, you alluded to it before, about its conversational style, but it's a little bit about inner dialogue going on, and musings and reflections.
Well, I think every mother thinks about what they're going to give to their daughter. What do I have to offer, whether it's advice or the family silver or whatever it happens to be. And so in that way, the poem spoke to me. So I really don't have much more to add than that.
Well, I just have to, thank you for your insight in bringing it forward. It was a great selection, and just a great representation of her work, and you brought it to life. So thank you.
Thank you, Ralph.
The next up, we have a return of Lisa Kelly, who's actually going to be reading another Avon Bolin piece. Hey there.
Hi, I'm back. Yes, this is another poll by Avon Bolin. I was completely unfamiliar with her. I'll just add a few little bits to what Sandra said. She was born in 1944. She emerged as one of the foremost female voices in Irish literature. In her writing, she honed an appreciation for the ordinary in life. Her subjects tended to be the fabric of domestic life, myth, love, history, and Irish rural landscape. She's a feminist writer. She always wrote out of an urge to make an honest account of the female experience. A lot of her work was informed by her experiences as a young wife and mother, and her growing awareness of the troubled role of Irish women in their history and culture. She was not afraid to explore topics such as domestic violence, anorexia, infanticide, and cancer. Modern Irish poetry, it is said, would be unthinkable without her presence. And she is held up as one of the foremost writers in contemporary Ireland before her death. She did split her time between the US and Ireland, and growing up, schooling in New York, partially, and Ireland. She taught at Stanford University, and she split her time between Palo Alto and Dublin before her death last year. This poem is called The Black Lace Fan My Mother Gave Me. It was written in 1990, which spoke to me. That's the year my oldest daughter was born. So that was the first place I found a connection. It does deal with feminist themes. You wouldn't think it. You do think maybe it's just a story of a fan that's passed down as a family heirloom. Just read a little bit. The fan can suggest a woman, elegance, beauty, the past. It can also symbolize something romantic and quite erotic. In the poem, she might be contemplating the relationship between man and woman and how society places women sort of outside history. Does the man, by giving the woman an object purely for women, try to control the woman and make her his subordinate? Is he turning her into an object of sexual desires? So it starts out as a mother telling her child, presumably her daughter, her own daughter, a story of a very special gift, the first gift that her father ever gave her mother in 1930s pre-war Paris in a summer heat wave at the start of their courtship. And it has some violent imagery in it. The fan is made of black lace and tortoise shell, and the tortoise shell can symbolize some darkness, violence, and pain when you think about how tortoise shell is harvested, which thankfully, I hope we don't do anymore. So the poem contrasts the beauty and elegance of this black lace fan with the violence needed to create it. It's also a reminder of the passing of time and how there is no way to really know the past when you are not present in it. And the final stanza is a metaphor using a black bird to represent the black lace fan. So keep an ear out for that imagery as I read The Black Lace Fan My Mother Gave Me. It was the first gift he ever gave her, buying it for 5 francs in the galleries in pre-war Paris. It was stifling. A starless drought made the nights stormy. They stayed in the city for the summer. They met in cafes. She was always early, he was late. That evening, he was later. They wrapped the fan. He looked at his watch. She looked down the Boulevard de Capuchin. She ordered more coffee. She stood up. The streets were emptying. The heat was killing. She thought the distance smelled of rain and lightning. These are wild roses, appliqued on silk by hand, darkly picked, stitched boldly, quickly. The rest is tortoiseshell and has the reticent, clear patience of its element. It is an underwater, worn out bullion, and it keeps, even now, an inference of its violation. The lace is overcast as if the weather it opened for and offset had entered it. The past is an empty cafe terrace, an airless dusk before thunder, a man running, and no way to know what happened then. None at all, unless, of course, you improvise. The blackbird on this first sultry morning in summer, finding buds, worms, fruit, feels the heat. Suddenly, she puts out her wing, the whole, full, flirtatious span of it.
Sophie approves. It's just, I find her work remarkable from a couple of perspectives. Like Inheritance before it, it's conversational, but it's so multi-layered. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Well, it's this, a story of an heirloom that's passed down, and presumably the poet will someday pass it down to her daughter. just evokes a mood. I told you in our rehearsal that I thought of those scenes in Casablanca when they're Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart are in Paris, that sort of atmosphere, Paris. Most people leave Paris in the summer if they can. So it's usually empty in those months, those hot months. And I really liked the imagery of calling the tortoiseshell a worn out underwater bullion. I thought bullion was just the perfect word. Everyone can picture a cup of bullion, that color of it, to really capture the faded tortoiseshell. Just very evocative, the storm that comes upon them. And this was his first gift to her, probably one of many. And, we know they married and had a family, but we really don't know what else happened or much else. So it's just like a brief snippet of time that's captured.
It's tantalizing.
Yeah.
I like what she did with this, and that she brings it full circle by starting with the talk about the fan. And by the way, great use of a prop.
Thank you.
No, I really appreciate it. But she brings us full circle. It starts with this conversation, and it seems like a normal conversation, but again, it suddenly becomes very multi-layered, and there's a lot going on there. And how she brings it full circle with the blackbird's wing opening.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly it's all wrapped up in that phrase, the whole full flirtatious span of it. It's very powerful. So thank you for the additional research and doing a great reading. Thank you.
Thank you for introducing me to her.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are returning to, I guess I really shouldn't use the word cohort in crime, but that would be Tara Sullivan, who's going to provide a reading of Patrick Kavanagh. Can you speak a little bit about this?
Absolutely. Patrick Kavanagh, who I wasn't terribly familiar with, to be honest, was called by critics when he was writing the nation's best poet since William Butler Yeats. So he was held in very high esteem for the critics of his time. He was born in 1904 and died in 1967. So he was really the first half of the century, going into the second, but he was known for his emotional connection and his, instead of an intellectual bend to his poetry, most of it is just a heartfelt on what he was feeling at any given subject at the time. What I found very interesting, of course, I always pick up the weird facts. It's going to be that way, is that he married Catherine Barry Maloney in 1967 and did what we call the ultimate Irish exit, also died in 1967. So I was intrigued, but he was only 63 when he passed away. But you'll see in this piece the feeling he had for his country and his land and where he was from, and it's called Peace. And sometimes I'm sorry when the grass is growing over the stones in quiet hollows, and the cocksfoot leans across the rutted cart paths, that I am not the voice of country fellows who now are standing by some headland talking of turnips and potatoes or young corn, of turf banks stripped for victory. Here, Peace is still hawking his colored combs and scarves and beads of horn. Upon a headland by a whinny hedge, a hare sits looking down a leaf-lapped furrow. There's an old plow upside down on a weedy ridge, and someone is shouldering home a saddle harrow. Out of that childhood country, what fools climb to fight with tyrants, love and life and time.
What a great finish. Yeah, you know, You said the name Kavanagh. You know, I guess I had read it as Kavanagh, or I'm not really sure actually how to pronounce his last name, actually having heard it said aloud. Um, Unimportant. He was a great poet, a great modern poet, and there seems to be this distinction between the poets of the late Romantic period and the Irish literary revival, such as Yeats, who create these rather kind of fantastical imagery. And here we're looking at something that's actually quite plain but powerful. Can you comment?
It's funny, when I first read this piece, I initially thought of The Red Wheelbarrow,
Hmm.
William Carlos Williams, right?
Yeah,
I hope.
yeah.
Just that it was so specific and so visual, and also kind of minimalistic in description. But I also found such a longing in this one. Like some of the pieces, or as we heard from Sandy's piece, her first piece, are so heartbreaking and difficult to hear due to the circumstances of the time in Ireland. And then you get to the 20th century and a little further into it, and it's kind of a return to the longing of Ireland. And modern day, of course, what people have experienced, but that kind of like, have I done the right thing? And we've seen this with other poets in this program, that they speak of the work, the physical labor that people of Ireland have always had to do. And there's almost a guilt or a step away from those who use pens as their weapons of choice or their tools. So I just thought that was notable.
Well, thank you. Well, again, well done, and a great piece. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be moving on to Jean Samakowicz, who is going to be doing a piece by Samuel Beckett. I'm kind of glad Jean's doing this piece. Jean has he knows a lot about Samuel Beckett as a playwright, and he's well, as you'll see, it's quite a powerful piece. Are you with us, Jean? Let's see if we can get you started on your video.
There we go. I'm mute and start the video. Hold on one second.
There you go.
Oh, we're good. Oh, good. Okay. Samuel Beckett is like a big brother to me because he wore black, and I like people that wear black clothes, and I just one of those things. He was born on April 13th in 1906 and passed away December 22nd in 1989. He was noted for his tragic comedies. That every tragical situation, there's a little bit of humor in it somewhere, particularly in his plays. He was big with experimental theater, huge. And in 1969 won the Nobel Prize for Literature. This poem that I'm about to read, called What Would I Do Without This World, is interesting because every time you read it, you can make it different. Because there's no spell and there's no punctuation, there's no rhyme scheme. It's you can make it up and you can put it all together for yourself if you want to, but then if you read it an hour later, it'll be different from what you read the hour before. If that doesn't make any sense, well, that's Samuel Beckett. Okay, we'll talk about his place a little bit later. Okay, let's take a look. What would I do without this world? What would I do without this world? Faceless and curious. We're to be last, but an instant, where every instant spills in the void, the ignorance of having been without this wave, where in the end, body and shadow together are engulfed. What would I do without this silence, where the murmurs die, the pantings, the frenzies towards succor, towards love, without the sky that soars above its ballast dust? What would I do? What I did yesterday and the day before, peering out of my deadlight, looking for another wandering like me, eddying far from all the living in a convulsive space, among the voiceless that throng my hiddenness. All right, Sam, what do you got? That's the kind of question you want to ask yourself as a fan of Beckett. Like I told you the other night, I'd had the privilege of directing Waiting for Godot with the Hudson Shakespeare Company, and it was quite an experience. Didn't have much of an audience, this is a select crew, but the people that came, they really enjoyed it. And one gentleman that came in for auditions memorized the entire play, not one role, but the entire play. So when I asked him for his monologue, did you have monologue prepared? He goes, sure. What would you like? And he gave me, which character would you like me to do it? I go, which one would you feel comfortable? I know the whole play. That's the kind of devotion you have with fans of Beckett. No, sorry, questions? Feel like I'm back in the classroom.
No questions. We'll get to questions at the end of the program, of course, and people are free to do so. If they want to learn a little bit more or get a little more elaboration from us. My own observation from the few Beckett plays that I've read, and at least one that I've seen, is, he as a playwright, he doesn't do dialogue like we've seen other playwrights, especially 20th century playwrights.
Right.
Dialogues are a bit of a construction in the traditional play.
Right.
It almost seems with Beckett as if all the characters are somewhat insular, and all of the dialogue is their inner thought just being expressed, and somehow he weaves that together into a present moment. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you take characters living in a garbage can for Endgame,
Yeah.
and that's the scene right there. It's all desolate, it's all earthy, and it's all tragic comedy, because in tragedy there's comedy, and in comedy there's tragedy. Okay.
Well, again, well done, and thank you for bringing your insights.
My pleasure.
To his work. Like I said, I think we were quite fortunate in being able to share that. We're down in the home stretch, folks. We've got two pieces to go. I am the speaker for both of those. The first piece that I'll be doing is it was just one of these, when you get started on one of these projects of program development, suddenly you kind of come across a gem. And this one's a real enjoyable one that Tara had brought when we were looking at the potential selection of pieces to perform. The poet's not really well known, and there's a good reason for that. His name is Brian Nolan, and he used a pen name of Flann O'Brien. If you can find this anywhere, like in an internet search, you'll find Flann O'Brien. And at the time that these things were being published, that he wrote these poems, no one knew who Flann O'Brien was. Now, it's not unusual in the literary community to go by pen name, and there's certainly lots of reasons, both good and silly, as to why people adopt them. When you learn the reason why Brian Nolan adopted a pen name, when I learned it, it brought a big chuckle to my face. And it's just simply this. He was an Irish civil servant, and he just saw so many absurd things in his workday. And he would, as a kind of a creative release, he would write about them, and he put them to verse. And they were always quite amusing and highlighting the absurd. And he just had a very peculiar insight into the human condition in the context of inside an Irish bureaucracy. The piece that we're going to share today is a real, it's all I can just say is a gem. I hope you enjoy it. I hope I do it justice. And I'm going to be reading Brian Nolan, Flann O'Brien, entitled, "A Pint of Plain is Your Only Man." When things go wrong and will not come right, though you do the best you can, when life looks black as the hour of night, a pint of plain is your only man. When your money's tight and hard to get, and your horse has also ran, when all you have is a heap of debt, a pint of plain is your only man. When health is bad and your heart feels strange, and your face is pale and wan, when doctors say you need a change, a pint of plain is your only man. And when food is scarce, and your larder bare, and no rashers grease your pan, When hunger grows as your meals are rare, a pint of plain is your only man. Brian Nolan. The last piece that I'll be reading today is it's one that has been endeared to me for a number of years. I was able to find a rare edition of the work of Joseph Campbell. Whenever I get to bring it into conversation, I talk about Joseph Campbell, and everyone goes, "Oh, Joseph Campbell, the guy who wrote about the mythic archetypes in The Hero with a Thousand Faces." And although his work is certainly quite brilliant, he's not that Joseph Campbell. He's a different Joseph Campbell. I can share a little bit about Joseph Campbell, and he has a unique link to America. We'll talk about that in just a few seconds. He was one of the principal leaders in the Irish Civil War. It's hard to give it justice here, but the real tragedy of the Irish Civil War was that both sides wanted the same thing and couldn't agree on how to get there. And it resulted literally with brothers killing brothers, family killing family, all divided on this issue in the struggle for national identity and independence. Like many of the leaders who were on the losing side of the Irish Civil War, he found himself in a self-exile. He was a contemporary of George William Russell. Russell ended up going to England, and Campbell, after the Irish Civil War, actually came to America. And he was actually a professor of literature at Fordham University, and taught literature. And it was also during this period where he wrote many of his poetic pieces. I have an original edition of his work. It comprises about 110 poems and some pieces of prose that are poetic. If you ever get an opportunity to get to share more of his work, I'd recommend reading it. The piece is called "When Rooks Fly Homeward." It's a rather beautiful piece. It's very reflective. It was actually set to music and is often played as part of memorial services. When rooks fly homeward and shadows fall, when roses fold on the hayard wall, when blind moths flutter by door and tree, then comes the quiet of Christ to me. When stars look out on the children's path, and gray mists gather on Carn and Rath, when night is one with the brooding sea, then comes the quiet of Christ to me. Joseph Campbell. We have come to the end of our program. We ran a little longer, well, almost about 50% longer than I expected, but I hope you were enriched by the not only the performances themselves, but the additional material that we were able to speak about and some of our commentary afterwards. If I would like to say you'll be rewarded by your patience if you can just stay with us a little bit more. We're going to open the floor up, and just for the sake of simplicity, if you have questions or comments, if you look at the bottom of your screens, there should be an item there that says chat. You can put your questions in there, and we'll ask the speakers to turn their videos on and respond to anything that you may have to say or share with us. We'll do this for about 5 minutes or so, and then again, there's just a short, brief poll that we're going to be taking to just get some direction for future programming, and would ask that you participate. I'll have you in and out of here in about 15 minutes if you can just stay with us a little bit longer. So if anybody has anything to share from our guest list today, please type it in the chat, and we'll direct it to wherever you want. So nothing yet. We'll give it a moment for fingers to limber up. All right. Well, look, doesn't appear as if there's any questions or comments, or everyone has actually left the Zoom meeting except for us. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and move forward. These polls that we're giving are asking you to rate the program and asking you some of your, preferences for what was read today, and also where we might take some future programming. Again, it's all anonymous. We can't trace it back to any individual, but I'll put the first poll up. And on a scale from 1 being the lowest to the highest, how would you rate today's program? And feel free to vote. And we're starting. The first question is on a scale from 1 to 5 highs. How would you rate today's program? There doesn't appear to be any voting going on. I don't know if that's a reflection of a glitch in how we configured this today. I apologize if that's the case. The second question was, in the first act, which of today's performance readings was your favorite? Looks like some looks like some folks are voting now. In the second act, which of today's performance readings was your favorite? And then we actually, the last question is about future programming ideas that we've bounced around. Again, these votes are starting to come in. I'll give this another minute or so, and then I'll be glad to share it with everyone. Okay, looks like the voting has slowed. We'll give it another minute here or so to 30 seconds. I still see some more votes coming in, so maybe might have just taken a moment for folks to become familiar on how to kind of punch the buttons if it was a new experience. A nice comment from a friend of mine, a dear old friend, Wanda Wiggins, just says, "This was amazing. Love the entire presentation. Please do more." I will. We will. We'll do it. It was amazingly rewarding, and so glad you were here, everyone that attended today. Okay, looks like we are almost fully voted. Okay, and I'm going to give it 10 more seconds, and then I'll share the poll results. Right, I'm going to end the polling, and I'm going to share the results. Here we go. Should be able to see on the screen the sharing poll results. The great majority of you rated it highly. We see one vote right there in the middle, and we realize, as this is our first attempt to do something like this online, we probably have lots of room to improve and probably streamline it in terms of timing. This ran a little bit long, so we acknowledge that. Going on to the second question, in the first act, which of today's performance reading was your favorite? And looks like we have a clear winner in the Famine Year by Lady Jane Wilde, and that was Sandy. So she gets today's gold star, and there were others that were favorite. Yay! Good stuff. And then in the second act, looks like Inheritance by Avon Boland, again by Sandy. Sandy, I'm just going to say it. I think it's a reflection of what a great job you do with all these pieces, and clearly, I've known each other a long time, and I'm just glad to call you my friend. But I'm also just equally glad that you've been able to participate in this and contribute the way you did.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm honored. Yeah, and others had preferences as well. Looks like a couple people liked a pint of plain. That's a great piece. Anyway, here's where some of the ideas we had for future programming. I'll just go through this rather quickly, and again, this will help guide our efforts for program development and see where it takes us. It looks like there seems to be interest in a number of broad areas by folks. So I asked you to pick your top three, but work of a single renowned poet. In other words, if we were to do a program, we would do it around the work of, say Robert Frost, for example, and create a program around that. A couple of interests in Elizabethan sonnets, American storytellers. I think there's some good opportunities there, as well as humor in the short story. You probably could combine both of those into a single program. Emerging voices, original community member poetry. I think one way or the other, we certainly would like to do that at some point. Memoirs, selected readings was one. Performance reading workshop got a vote, and sonetry for beginners got a vote. But this was really helpful feedback for all of us. I deeply appreciate you being able to participate, not only as an audience, but also to give us some guidance about future program development. Some other comments here. Want to avoid picking something I read myself, but even avoiding my own reading, I would like the option of voting for a three-way tie. Okay, good idea. And then from Evelyn Hampton to everyone, all the reading selections were wonderful. Thanks to all for putting the program together. Very enjoyable and inspiring. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Well, again, I would like to extend my...
I wanted to thank you all for inviting me to participate. It was a real thrill, and I would look forward to doing this some more in the future.
I think we're going to have some great opportunities to do so. So I personally have a great big thank you not only to the Long Branch Public Library and its director, Tanya Garcia, but especially for Tara Sullivan, who she and I literally have been talking about this for a year. And, in the last 6 weeks, we kind of came up with this idea of being able to do it online, and really couldn't have done it without her. And additionally, really couldn't have done it without the participation of all our performance readers who just, one of the great rewards I have personally is just seeing how people end up owning these pieces and bringing their own, just bringing their own spirit to it, and it comes across, and it's just done very well. So again, thank you to them, and most importantly, thank you for being our audience today and being our guest and allowing us to share in this way. I think that's it. We can call this a wrap. Again, thank you so much, and we'll see you in the future. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Slante.
I wish I was in Carrickfergus, only for nights in Ballygrand. I would swim over the deepest ocean, for my love to find. But the sea is wide, and I can't swim over, neither have I wings to fly. If I could find me the handsome boatman to ferry me over to my loving isle. My childhood days bring back sad reflections of happy times spent so long ago. My boyhood friends and my own relations have all passed on now, like the melting snow. But I'll spend my days in endless roaming, soft is the grass, my bed is free. Oh, to be back now in Carrickfergus, on that long road down to the salty sea. And in Kilkenny, there it is reported, there are marble stones there, as black as any ink, with gold and silver. I would support her, but I'll sing no more now till I get a drink. For I am drunk today, and I'm seldom sober. A handsome rover from town to town. Oh, but I'm sick now, and my days are numbered. So come ye young men and lay me down.